All right, so you should get a prompt on your machines, on your Zooms that we are recording. So, my name is Richard Huggins. I'm going to be the sole presenter today, but I am not the only person from WebXam here. Kevin Williamson is here, uh, Dr. Bridget McHugh, and Andy Stansel, who will be in the chat answering answering questions, and I think Brock Hertzfeld will be joining us as well. So, with that, we will get started. Um, Let me just get switched on here. Okay, so what we're going to be doing here is walking through as many reports as we can get through, and we are going to sort of demonstrate each one. We're going to talk about a few things. We're going to show how to sort of integrate some of that data into Excel or into Word. Uh, and we're going to try to answer your questions as best as we can in chat, and anything left over we'll try to pick up at the end of the session. So feel free to use the chat to discuss things as things go along, to ask questions. And with that, let's get started. So the first report I am going to talk about today is something you might not even really consider a report, but it is one of the most popular reports that we have. And that's the report that you see when you click on secondary student and view a student's details. So let me pretend to randomly pick a student. In this case, that will be this user, Millie Champagne. So what you'll notice when you expand a user is that you'll see a test results screen down here, and that lists all of the tests that that student has taken, and then it also lists the pathway scores for all the pathways that are part of the CTE 26 for the program that the student is in. Or has, I think it's just if they're in it, but it could also be has been. Anyway, there are two things I want to cover here. The first is this new CTAG column. And this new CTAG column tells you whether or not that test is a CTAG or has a CTAG, and if so, whether or not the student has agreed to the electronic data sharing for that test. So this should be showing up currently on the current WebXam site, and it has three possible values. The first one is just blank, which means it's not a CTAG. Let me invite. Oh, my apologies. Admit all. Sorry, I forgot to change the to turn off the waiting room. So let me do that. Um, hmm, I apologize. One moment here. Okay. So it may be blank if it's not a CTAG. It will have this little blank with the checkbox on it if it is a CTAG. and you'll see it say CTAG with assent if you mouse over it, and then it will have this blank checkbox if it's a CTAG without assent. And so that is all visible from here. Now, what I like to recommend that users do oftentimes for if you're generating some student level reporting that maybe you're going to send to students or share with a guidance counselor or whatever, is to use this copy results to clipboard button. Because doing so drops that data into your clipboard. And so then if you're over in Word, maybe you have like a nice Word template with your school logo on it, maybe the WebXam logo or the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce logo. Then you can just paste that data in, maybe change the font a little bit so everything fits. Um, as you would expect it to. Layout, switch that over to landscape. And so this way, you can see scoring data for Amelia Champagne, and you'll see it will include the date that this report was generated so that when you share this, people will know exactly when you're sharing it from. And then also you'll notice includes that CTAG information. So that's the first thing I wanted to show you is that CTAG, that new CTAG column, as well as how to super easily copy and paste that data into a template if you choose to do so. Okay, moving on. The next report we're going to talk about here is the summary report. Now, I like to recommend, particularly for teachers, but also for administrators, that starting with the summary report is the best way to make sure you're getting the data you need to see. And this year, as I think we've covered in the past, you can choose the tested on or since and the tested through. Those are optional. Or you can just select the year, but the year option. So if you just select the year, you're going to see all the testing sort of in your school or in your classes or whatever. In your programs, you're going to see all of that testing in one space. But if you choose to limit it, maybe by testing on or since, and maybe we choose October 1st. And so now we're only going to see the testing that you've done since the 1st. And so we're only going to see post tests in this situation. So that's sort of a way to sort of limit down what's in the summary report. You can also sort of say, hey, actually, I want to see, instead of that, I want to see the testing that occurred before October 1st. And so you can just do that. And so this shows you all the testing, which in this case is going to be all pre-testing, that occurred before October 1st. Now, for the sake of this demo, I am going to switch back to last year and run this summary report. And let's say we want to do it, we want to look for a particular teacher, perhaps Mario Colombiana, for example. And now we're going to see just the tests that that teacher delivered last year. And what we want to focus on, for example, might be this child and adolescent development test. What you'll notice and what I strongly recommend you use is this little magnifying glass, because that will execute a testing report based on the data in this row of information. And so if we click that, we'll now see a testing report for that particular test for that particular year. In this testing report, if you've selected a date on or a date from, we'll include that information as well. So now we are seeing all the testing that teacher did last year in this particular test. Now, one thing you may notice sometimes is that if you have a student who has taken the test multiple times, by default, they'll show up in this report multiple times. So here, for example, is the student Anna Washington. They've taken the test twice. They took it on the 10th of April and then again on the 15th of May. And you'll notice they improved their score significantly. It's still not passing, but at least they've improved their score significantly. But you may not always want that. You may prefer to only be seeing one row per student. And so now there is a new option available in this report called one row per student per test. And if you select that and run that report, you'll now see when we go to Anna Washington that they are only showing up once. And importantly, it's only showing the highest score. So that is a way if you just want to have one row per student per test in your testing report. And if you want to have some additional columns of data, for example, the timing information, maybe some additional testing information, you can always click this Show Additional Details. And that includes a lot of additional info, as you can see. It might be difficult to read, so you might want to choose to export that data out as well. So just so you're aware that show additional detail is there. I'm going to turn that off for now because we'd like to be able to see what we're doing. And that one row per student per test also affects this reporting aggregate data down here. So that will sort of change this data if you're using that to track how your students are doing compared to the rest of the state. So one thing you might notice is that, say you were to choose, instead of the student's name, choose their SSID as a report identifier, is that you'll get an SSID instead of that student's name. And this is the first example of using Excel to maybe do some work for you. So you may choose to copy this data into the clipboard, go over to Excel, and paste it in. Now I'm going to do this a little like a cooking show, where I'm going to prepare the ingredients here, and then I'm just going to switch over and take the final product out of the oven. So in this case, it's going to look like this. And so let's say an associate school has sent you a list of SSIDs and saying, hey, these are our students. Can you send me reporting based on these students? And so now in my testing report, I can use an XLOOKUP command formula and run that, and it will find those 3 students that are in Associate School 1. And for those of you who are old-time Excel users, you may be using VLOOKUP. XLOOKUP and VLOOKUP are largely similar, but XLOOKUP is 1,000 times better. So if you are using VLOOKUP a lot in your sort of daily work, consider switching over to using XLOOKUP. It adds a lot of flexibility. But at any rate, from there, you can then choose to filter that down to just those three students, assuming I can do that correctly. You'll have just those three students, and you might choose to copy those out and send that data over to your, maybe your colleague at that associate school. So just be aware that that's a functionality that's available where you can combine Excel with um, with the testing report and generate some valuable reporting in this context for your associate schools, but perhaps in other contexts as well. And just as an FYI, I am going to share this workbook on our user reports webpage after this session, so that if some of that's not familiar to you, if using XLOOKUP is new and you want to sort of look up how to do it, you can use this to help you do that. Okay, so that is the testing report. I'm going to clear out this. Blink. Okay, and now just expand that a little bit. Okay, the next report we're going to look at is the pathway report. Because the pathway report takes so long to run, I have already run it over here. And so in this case, I've chosen a criminal justice program with a particular teacher. I've said I'm interested in a particular cohort, and I want to see testing in all years. And I also changed this tests required in the program to be 3, because that's sort of a typical concentrator level minimum number of tests. And so what you'll see when you execute this report, for example, for Shelby Adams here, is you'll see a first row, and that is sort of getting into their pathway scoring. And then you'll see a row for each test they have taken in that pathway. And you'll note that the student has retaken one of these tests. And so now it's using the higher score, or in this case, it's the same score. But it would be using the highest score if that student had scored higher between the first time they took the test and the second time. That you can see right here. So in this case, the student retook the test after a month. Their score did not improve, and so it is using the earliest one. And again, this is another case where if you want one row per student, you can click the Show Pathway Rows Only option, and that will give you just that pathway row along with the number of tests the student has taken in that pathway. So now we're seeing Shelby Adams has taken 4 different tests, then you'll see their scoring. If a student has taken less than 3 tests, which is what we selected, you'll see that now they're listed as being incomplete in that pathway, but they're currently doing very well in this example. So this is just a way for you to know, oh, you know what, I'm really expecting all of my students to have taken at least 3 tests in this cohort of students. And so now I can see, hey, which students do I need to sort of check up on? Again, the pathway report can be very useful, and in terms of both getting that scoring information and helpful in making sure that all of the testing you need to do is occurring. But if not, There's another report coming up that will deal with that as well. All right, I'm going to jump down a little bit to this activations uh, test, or to this activations report. And you can use this activations report to see what upcoming or current activations are occurring. You can choose to filter by location or teacher or by particular time, maybe in the future. You don't have to. You can just run that report. But because it's a demonstration, before we do that, we'll need to activate some tests. So I am going to step through the test activate process real quickly here. And this gives me just a quick chance to note that field testing is going on this year. The field testing career areas are both arts and communications, as well as information technology. So if the program you're activating tests for is in either of those career areas, just be advised as this sort of screen goes through that there's no pre-tests available. Those students may require, we will likely require more time than I normally would because these field tests are significantly longer. All students in these courses must test before the field testing deadline closes in mid to late April. Final scores will be released approximately 2 weeks after the field testing window closes. And per Odoo's retake policy, which is basically graduating students can retake these tests in their final form, that will be available again 2 weeks after the field testing window closes. So we encourage you to be aware of that information and to share that with your IT and arts and communications teachers as needed. In this case, we'll move forward. We'll select the program we're interested in. This is a B2, I think that's Visual Arts and Communications. We'll select a course, maybe digital image editing, and we'll take a look. And so this will let us activate students. We might choose to schedule a time in the future, perhaps on Wednesday the 10th. And we'll pick a few random students here. Pick 3, for example. And we will select activate. Now, what would typically happen is that you click this download activated option to select and to download a PDF of testing tickets. But let's say you forget and you just move on. And you're like, well, what do I do now? Do I have to go back and unactivate and reactivate, deal with all of that? Well, not necessarily, because you can use that activation report. And if we run that now, we'll see we have this upcoming session from this teacher for digital image editing starting tomorrow or Wednesday at 10:55, and that there are 3 test takers. And if we click on the little green plus over here, we can click on that green plus, and we'll see each of those students listed along with their usernames and access codes. But you can also choose to download that data now. And so now you'll get those testing tickets for those students that you can cut out, distribute as needed. So just keep in mind that activation report can serve as a failsafe in case you forgot to download the testing tickets when you were activating the test. It can also just give you a way to sort of check and see each day, hey, what testing is likely to be upcoming today. Obviously some teachers activate day of, so that may not be in 100% of the testing that occurs, but at least it's a way of sort of confirming what's coming up as a plan. Okay, the next report we're going to talk about is the CTAG Testing and Ascent report. So the purpose of this report is to allow you to see sort of how your students did on specific CTAG assessments, and also confirm that they have activated the tests or agreed to the data sharing agreement if they have chosen to. So in this case, let's pick maybe dental radiography for the current year, and we'll run this report. We come back with all the students who have taken this report this year. And what you may notice is that, hey, I've got some students here who were proficient on this test, but didn't agree to electronically data share their data with whatever schools they choose to apply to that will accept those CTAGs. So if you want to give those students an option to change that agreement, you can choose the schedule update option here. And you do that by selecting this checkbox. And you can select multiple students. You can have students reaffirm if you want to. But in this case, we'll just check these two students and we'll drop down here to schedule updates. Now, this works very much like activating any other kind of test, in that you can sort of choose a time. Perhaps we want to not do this until Friday, and we want to do it maybe a little bit later in the day. Maybe we'll do it at 12. Yeah, and we'll just do the scheduling. And so now, at that time, at 12 o'clock on Friday, these students will be able to log in with this information and take that test. Or, excuse me, and they'll be able to sort of review their agreements. You can even choose to download those activation testing tickets if you prefer to. Same as you would any other test. So let's show you what that would look like for the student, just so you'll be able to help them if you need to. So I'm going to log out. I'm going to sign in as that student. Oh, because I chose Friday, of course, there's currently nothing available. So I am going to sign back in as my user. I apologize I forgot that that's the way that worked. But it's a good thing to keep an eye on, that if you activate into the future, the student won't be able to take a test or change this agreement unless they are activated at the current time. And so let's do that again, but do it for the current time. Let's hope that works. So we'll log in as that student again. And now you'll see there's a button at the top of the screen called Update CTAG Ascents. And so the student can click this option and they will see, hey, this dental radiography test, you have not assented to share those scores. If you'd like to change that, the student can click on change. The student can reread the agreement because we want them to make sure they know what they're agreeing to. And then they can choose, perhaps in this case, the yes option to change that agreement. So we'll click yes, and we'll notice that that's immediately changed here. So now the student knows that they have agreed to share that data electronically. And so if we log back in as our administrator and we rerun that report, and run this, that'll also be immediately reflected in the CTAG reporting as well. So you now see that that student has agreed to that data sharing agreement so that when we export that data over to the Ohio Department of Higher Education through the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce, that data will then be available to any schools that will accept it. And I will also add that we are working on with our partners on adding support for students who maybe took these tests last year to be able to update those agreements if needed. Currently, you can only do this scheduling update for tests taken in the current year, but we are working on adding that for previous years. So stay tuned, more on that to come. All right, moving on to the outcome report. And this, we're going to spend a lot of time on this outcome report because we're going to show you some visualizations. We're going to show you how to use some of this data. May hopefully give you some ideas, but if not, at least again, at least see some visualizations that might be helpful. So in this case, we are going to pick a particular teacher. In this case, that user will be Ronan Wood. We'll pick a test. This is a hospitality teacher, so it'll be dining room services and operations. And we're going to look at data from last year. And so we'll run this report. And what we're going to see is sort of class averages for the following columns of data. You're going to see how your students did on the pretest, how your students did on the post-test. You're going to see statewide averages for both of those, and you're going to see a blueprint percentage. And this is telling you, sort of from the WebXam blueprints, how many questions in our bank of questions related to the subject code are aligned to this particular outcome. And so as you might expect, even if we were to sort this, two of the most important outcomes as identified by subject matter experts like yourselves is dining room operations and consumer services, which of course makes perfect sense for a dining room service and operations test. Now, the thing I sort of want to mention about these blueprint percentages is A, they're talking about the entire bank of questions associated with this subject code. So that's the post-test, that's the pre-test, and that's also any additional questions that were written for the subject code. So just be aware that this isn't a one-to-one with the questions that are on the post-test. The other thing to keep in mind is that this level of importance was chosen by subject matter experts like yourselves, so it represents not only which questions are most sort of important or most represented on the test, they're also telling you which outcomes are most important in terms of what subject matter experts think. Um, and Dr. McHugh will tell you when we have meetings and webinars like this with her that she distributes a survey every year whenever we're rewriting an assessment that allows us to gather data on which of the outcomes are most important. And so again, that defines not just what what questions are going to be written to, but also really defines what's important on that assessment according to subject matter experts like yourselves. So just be aware of how important these blueprint percentages are. Um, okay. The next thing I want to make sure you're aware of, and it's a little bit hidden because it's just a little checkbox here, and that is the show student details checkbox. And what this does is this disaggregates all of that data out by student, which can be exceptionally useful when it comes to remediation. But it can be useful in other cases as well. You might choose, for example, to talk about this if you want to send outcome data to this one particular student, maybe Harry Belmont, um, that you can just share that with them via the screen. Uh, so we were going to come back to this in a second, but I just want to make sure and cover that this show student details option is available for you. Now, let's say, unhide that. Let's say I want to get a sense of, has my teaching improved for these outcomes over the last, say, 3 years? Or is there situations where maybe the lessons I have chosen maybe aren't getting this content across as well as I'd hoped? And so to do that, we might use this copy again. We might switch over to Excel and copy that data in. 2025, 2025, and then, maybe we'll drag that down. Uh, and then we might choose to go to last year, or I guess 2 years ago, rerun this report, copy that data as well, drop that into our little workbook here. I think I'm here. Yeah. 2024, 2024. Uh, drag that, drag that down. And then again, let's go one more year back. So we can choose 2022, 2023. And so this works best if a test has been out for several years in use. Because if it's been recently rewritten, then obviously there's not a whole lot of value in comparing a new set of outcomes to an old set of outcomes. But once we do this, 2023, I don't know if you all are like this, but I have to say what I'm doing. So I apologize for that. So now we have 3 years worth of outcome data, and I'm going to switch over because I've combined that data here for those 3 years. So this is the test we were talking about. This is the outcome code, and these are the sort of scores of my students on the post-test for those 3 years. And then I just can generate a bar chart that shows me how my students did on that outcome for each of the last 3 years. And you'll notice some cases, for example, look at this one, um, 1.10, where my students' performance has dropped a little bit each year. And so maybe I want to make sure that the lesson or unit or whatever it is teaching that content the way I expect it to. You may also notice that there are other outcomes, for example, 4.05 here, where, oh, my students have really seen an increase recently. So that might tell you, hey, I'm doing a good job on preparing my students to be assessed on 4.03. So we might look back over at the outcome report here or on the blueprint and see what 4.03 is. In this case, it's ingredient selection and preparation. So I'm clearly doing well there. And I mean, you'll notice you can probably eyeball that as well. Look, just putting the report together, but there's nothing like a nice visualization to be able to see what's going on. So this was an example of taking 3 years worth of outcome data, combining that into one chart or into one table, and then creating a bar chart to sort of show you how you're doing. And so that's something that I hope will be useful for people to see. But another thing I mentioned was the possibility of using this to help with remediation. So let's pick a pretend random student here. In this case, Esmeralda Ross. Why did that work? All right. Well, it looks like maybe Esmeralda has a new name, and is now Madeline. Anyway, you'll notice that there's a number of columns associated with that student, how they did in the pre-test and the post-test, and how they did how what the blueprint percentages. But maybe we want to retest this student. And so we want to make sure that we optimize their time, the 30 days that they have to do their remediation. And so we might take that data, copy that over to, oh, I know, I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm just going to switch back because I should have chosen last year. So just to make sure everything we're seeing makes sense, I just want to make sure that I'm choosing the correct student. ROSS. ROSS. This is why I am prepared my ingredients in advance because sometimes I mistype things. And so again, we might choose to copy that data, paste it in to Excel, and maybe into a scratch pad like I have done here, and then switch over to a table like this, where I have my student Esmeralda Ross. I have how that student did on the post-test. I have how what the statewide data for that test looks like. I have the blueprint percentage, and now maybe just for fun, I want to generate what we might call a value calculation. To sort of tell me, hey, where is a student going to get the most value in remediation? In this case, I chose a fairly simple formula. I said, hey, take me where the student has a lot of improvement, perhaps compared to the statewide average on that test, have lots of room for improvement, and where that outcome is covered a lot on the assessment. And so, again, while we can probably eyeball that, using this value calculation to draw a chart might give us a better idea of where a student needs to be focusing their remediation efforts. And so we'll see that here. These positive values are outcomes where based on that formula I showed you, might get the most value from uh, maybe some extra lessons or some extra credit or whatever it might be. Maybe some one-on-one tutoring, whatever might be most appropriate. And so that might be outcome 3.4 or outcome 2.6 or outcome 4.4. And we can take a quick peek at what those outcomes are. For example, 3.4 is equipment safety and sanitization, as well as food staples and preparation. So these are all things you would expect to see. I think, what was the other one? 2.06, as well as customer services. So again, if we want to maximize the student's chances of improving their score on that retake, we might choose to focus on those three particular areas in terms of giving them some additional work to do. And so that is a situation where the outcome report can really come in handy. Doing this kind of visualization can be really helpful for your teachers or for you to sort of make sure that you're using your students' time and your time as well as possible. So again, I will make this report available afterwards, or this Excel spreadsheet afterwards, so you can sort of, if it's useful to you, you can use as a sample. But this is a fairly simplistic formula, so you might choose to do something a little more complex, um, just based on your own needs. But the idea is to sort of maybe come up with a value calculation for what's most important, and then generate a visualization using that data. Okay, the last or second to last report I want to cover today is the teacher effectiveness report. Now, we get a lot of questions about this report. So the idea behind this report is to sort of make sure that you're getting the most out of your pre-testing dollar here at Ohio State, or here at the here in WebXam. So to that end, if you're a teacher and you've delivered pre-test and post-test, this will sort of tell you how you're doing, how your students did on the pre-test, how your students did on the post-test, how much gain there was in terms of overall scoring, and a little sort of phrase telling you whether or not that's effective, not effective, or whatever. But what tends to draw a lot of questions is this compliance report. And I suspect that's because that's the name of that report, um, which is fine. The idea behind this compliance, let me run this for last year. The idea behind this compliance report is to allow you as an administrator or you as a teacher to make sure you're maximizing your pretest dollar. And so you should see in general somewhere close to compliance report. You should see somewhere close to, but very rarely 100%. Because what this is telling you is how many students took this post test with this particular teacher, and how many students took the pre-test and took the post-test. Now, obviously, students are going to drop throughout the year, so you will rarely hit 100% on this. It's much more likely that you'll have something in the 90s, maybe even down in the 80s. And if you click on the green plus, you'll also see, hey, here's a list of the students that maybe have not yet taken that post-test. You can check maybe against your roster, make sure if that student has not dropped, to make sure to go in and assess them. But it's again, I want to say this again, and well, this is the first time I'll say this, that none of this data is reported anywhere unless you choose to report it somehow. It's all about, for you as a school, making sure you're maximizing what you're spending on WebXam pretests. By making sure for every student that you're giving that pretest to, that you're also giving them the post-test if they haven't dropped or withdrawn in the meantime. So that is the teacher effectiveness report, and specifically what this compliance report means. We do get a lot of questions about that. The last report I want to cover is also the newest report, and that is the program progress report. And so for that is not available with all the other score reporting. That is available under this programs section up here. And so let's say we have an R7 program that's delivered at a local school, but is administered by the Career Center. If we click on this plus, we'll see that that program includes these 4 courses and is taught by a particular teacher. And we have a program progress option here. And so clicking that button will show you for each student that's in that program where their account is not archived, it will show you which tests they have taken, which tests they are eligible to take based on the retake windows. So you'll be able to see that this particular student, Ross Belmont, has taken 2 of the tests and they still need to take 2 more within that program. Whereas the student has taken 3 of those tests. When some of these other students, because they maybe are just getting started in the program, have not yet taken any of the tests in that program. So again, this is a way for you to keep track of what testing needs to be done. And this is one of the reasons we switched over to using CTE 26s and defining programs the way we did a few years ago, was so that we could give you reporting on what tests it is your students may still need to take. Because until we did that, we would have had no way of knowing. So just be aware that this report is up here and available to you if you need it. And the reason it's kept separate and the reason we don't show any scoring is because we don't want to cause any confusion about what is and is not getting reported. What gets reported is every test a student has taken, whether that test was in their program or not. And so we just want you to be aware of that. We don't want to confuse that with what tests they've taken in the program and what the scoring was in the program. So that's why we keep this report separate. And that's why you'll notice in the school reporting, we don't include any information about what program that student is in. So with that, I was hoping to leave more time for questions, but I was not able to. I am going to stop sharing my screen and we'll answer as many questions as we can that were unanswered. So I'm going to, it's not a ton of questions, which is what I'm always glad to see. The first question is if a student did not score proficient, but they click agree to the assent, is the box checked? As Angie said, yes. The box, it can still be checked because if it's a field testing scenario, then we don't know if a student is proficient or not. When they complete the test, we won't know that until much later on. And so we just felt the easiest approach was to be consistent every time a student takes a CTAG assessment and always give them that option to do that assent. In terms of how that gets reported, it basically doesn't. So it's not as though the college will see, oh, the student tried to take this dental radiography test but didn't pass it. They'll just see whether or not the student agreed to the assessment if they were proficient. That's so very helpful. Okay, well, man. Well, I am here for another at least 3 minutes. I'm happy to stay longer. answering questions. So feel free to ask away in the chat and I will answer as best I can. Otherwise, you don't have to stick around any longer than you want to. Yeah, I do agree. Monica says in chat, I'm going to need a lot of time to process this information. I did go through a lot of information very quickly, so I apologize for that. But I just wanted to make sure I got as much information from you as possible. This data will be posted, or this recording will be posted to YouTube. The spreadsheet I used, I will also post on the news.webexam.org/users dash workshop page for you to review. So I'm just going to sit here quietly and give you the opportunity to ask any questions you want to. All right, I am going to go ahead and stop the recording now.